The house was a desiccated ruin. Once magnificent, it had been picked clean like a fetid corpse by those who lived on the street. Every window was shattered, every wall saturated with spray paint and the foul odor of human excrement. I stepped over one of the foul-smelling individuals as I pushed through the gate, read the name of the family who had owned it, Kucher, forever engraved on the steel. The homeless man behind me let out an unhappy groan and sat up. He called out to me, and I glanced back at him. He had a weathered face, dirty clothing with fingerless gloves. His pasty skin was covered by a thick red-brown beard that matched his wiry hair. I'd remember his face, just like I remembered everything else I saw. Ignoring his calls, I strode up to the offset door that led into the atrium and pushed the wood aside. The door came tumbling down with a crash, yet I didn't hear it. All I could ask myself was, who were these people? What happened to them? When did they live here? The questions swirled around in my mind as I took in the building's interior. It was just as bad as the outside, if not worse. Rain was able to wash away the filth on the surface, but on the inside the building was rotting in the most literal sense of the word. Perhaps it is a strange hobby, like my brother would say, but I do enjoy this. I decided not to take a satisfied breath through my nostrils, though, and focused on looking around. I made my way through the living room and into the kitchen. Most of the objects in the old living space were garbage that the vagrants had brought inside. A doll, a pair of parkas, a grocery cart, and even a heat lamp that was attached to a car battery. I knelt down examining the rig. It was well made, and it gave off a steady warmth when I switched it on. Turning it off again, I decided that I'd find no real evidence here. I moved on to the kitchen. Here the floor was littered with paper, grease stains marred the walls and gave the place an almost sweaty look. I knelt down and dug through the pile, looking for something of use. Most of it was garbage, coupons, and even a letter from a credit card provider addressed to Lisa Smith. Frowning, I tossed the letter aside. I had just about given up when I found another letter, a bill. The envelope was addressed to Joseph Kucher. There was no logo on the envelope, and the paper inside was torn and most of it stained with an assortment of liquids. There was a reference to a debt, in an amount that made my head spin. No account number to verify who the debt was to, though. I let out a sigh and folded up the clue. It was something. I made a point to go through all the drawers, and even as far as opening the oven. Every now and then, there! A small box, inside it a key. It was a simple key designed for homes. I toured the lower level a bit more before discovering that none of the rooms on the first floor required such a key. Perhaps I was getting a bit carried away, but I wanted to know more. I made my way to the steps and placed my foot down. The step, or at least half of it, collapsed under me. I stared in disbelief as when I lifted my foot the step returned to normal. There was a low clicking sound coming from somewhere beneath me. I pressed my foot down on the step again, the same result. I glanced over at the left side of the step and put my foot down. It stayed steady. Curiosity had taken hold with gusto. There was no turning back now. I had to know who these people were. I took my time ascending the steps, testing each before moving on. There was a particularly tricky step that flattened all the steps if I landed on it. I was fortunate that I had grabbed onto the rail just before I took the step. I pulled myself over it and finished my ascension. The upper floor was obviously cleaner than the others. Very few people managed to get up here without injuring themselves, no doubt. I made my way down the hall, testing doors with the key until I found what I was looking for, a study. Inside were piles of books of all kinds. The desk was a mess, a wreck of disjointed organization that was topped off with several empty bags of chips. Next to the empty bags was a brochure, stained with a coffee ring. An invitation to a rehabilitation facility, and I opened it. Most of the programs were geared towards drug use, alcoholism, post-injury rehabilitation, and even gambling. I thought about the bill in my other pocket and shook my head. There just wasn't enough information. I was about to leave the room when I saw a large wooden cupboard off to the side and behind a broken bookshelf. It was sealed off with its own lock. Intrigued, I made my way over and began to examine the lock. It was much nicer than the other one that had led to this room, but it required a particular key. It took me nearly a half hour to locate that key, hidden under the pile of papers on the desk. More debts surfaced as I dug through the papers, names still blacked out. I approached the door and unlocked it, throwing it open with a triumphant "Aha!" before falling silent. Photographs, nearly a dozen of them, all of the same girl. As a child, a teenager, and even a young woman. She had bright red hair and deep green eyes, and she was smiling, even laughing in many of the pictures. Beneath the pictures was a stone with a tiny handprint. Lisa, it said beneath the print. I put the print down and let out a sigh. I went through the rest of the pictures, ending with one of her with no hair to speak of. She looked tired and sad and old. I shook my head and looked back at the other pictures. In this one she stood with a tall, pasty man with dark red hair and a twinkle in his eyes. I stepped away from the wardrobe and closed the door, descended the steps, careful this time, and made my way out the door. I saw him lying where he had been, just at the threshold of the estate, and sat down next to him. "Your daughter was beautiful," I said. The old man nodded, but said nothing. "She would want you to move on, though. She's not coming back for that doll," I said. He stared at me. I gave him my best smile. "You're an engineer, right? You of all people should be able to fix this place up. I'm sure she would like that." His gaze never broke, yet I saw the tears well up in his eyes. I got to my feet. "Good luck, Joe."